here. It's the first time I've been to a Podcar City conference. I've met quite a lot of people I've worked with off and on over the last 10 years or so. I met some quite new, exciting people. Personally, I found it very interesting this morning. Become a bit disillusioned with PRT or APM recently. A lot of projects I'd worked on hadn't gone anywhere. The industry didn't seem to be moving forward. So listening to some of you today, this morning, sounds like we are moving forward. If you forgive the joke, things are moving quite fast in the transport technology world. So that's good. But before we get too excited with all the technology, I primarily work in planning and business case work, assessing PRT systems, cable car systems, other innovative technologies. I think before we get into the technology, which I know is the exciting bit, you need to consider why are these technologies needed, what about the communities they serve, what are the obstacles we need to overcome to actually turn what's a great idea into a real-life project. So I've called this presentation Making the Case, and I'm sort of dropping in bits and pieces I've learned over the last couple of years working on business cases and initial sort of concept designs. And it's essentially a summary of what I've learnt, some of the techniques, and a bit of the basics on things you need to consider. I've also touched on some other modes, not just Podcars. I think there's other niche modes we need to consider, and all these things have an appropriate application, and it's meeting that application with the correct design. That is when you're going to get something which is deliverable, financeable, politically interesting, and will end up being a project. And I called this slide the problem, which is what I think the problem is for us as a community. We're all interested in innovative solutions. And there's a lack of awareness amongst them. Quite often, an innovative solution isn't considered as part of a master plan, as part of a city solution. These things aren't well understood, and quite often are thrown into the too difficult, not understood, too costly bracket before people do enough due diligence. There's also the availability and reliability of information. So there's a lot of information on the internet, but as things change rapidly, Rivian's looking at their third generation vehicle now. That's going to change all the costing models. That'll change the infrastructure requirements. There's driverless cars are now, looking not too far away. How do you look at those? What are the costs associated? What's the operating model? And one of the problems with the internet is information stays there a long time. So, you can type in costs of PRT. You'll find thousands of websites probably. Some of them will use very outdated information. Some of them are based on pressure groups against PRT. Some maybe pressure groups for PRT. So it's difficult to know what information to rely on. I think a big issue for moving forward is the regulatory environment. So we heard this morning from companies who can build an innovative vehicle. It can operate at low speeds in a pedestrian environment. But the legal framework for that, the insurance framework, that's maybe 2, 3, 4 years away. Do you want to invest in that project now, or do you want to wait for the legal situation to catch up? Finally, there's a lack of suitably qualified practitioners. There's probably a great deal of the entire PRT knowledge of the world in this room right now. So heaven forbid there's an accident. But if you're a public body, if you're a bank, if you're a financier, who do you turn to find out about this? And I think over time there is an industry body evolving. There's suitably qualified people out there, but I think there's more to be done. This next slide's not really showing anything in particular, apart from it is a complex problem. This is just one consideration someone did a while ago, looking at if you want to design a guideway, what are all the things you need to look at? Can you imagine how many feedback loops there are in there? Then you add in passenger comfort, station design. You end up with this multi-layered, technical problem. But it's not just the technical problem. You've then got planning law. How do you get it through, political stakeholders? How do you finance it? Who operates it? How do you insure it? So actually, the problem is hugely complex. So sort of what I've been doing the last couple of years for Arup is I sort of do the initial concepts, sort of business case, technical evaluation. We work with a lot of the manufacturers, we work with the industry group, we have our own knowledge from other projects. So we try and distill these things into fairly simple, is there legs in this project, should you invest in it, or is this, a dead duck from day one? And the way we do that, we essentially build an evaluation model. So I've framed it around 3 themes really. Is there a technical case? And if you're after an innovative alternative mode, why is that the correct mode? Because tried and trusted tends to be trusted. That's what cities want. You go to a city and say, I want to do this solution. They normally say, well, what's my competitor doing? What's my comparator city? And if you say they're doing a bus solution, quite often they want a bus solution. So you need to have a case for why the alternative mode is the right one. Now, quite often that case is it's the only way to do it. So if you look at some of the project examples I've got at the end, I'll explain why an innovative mode was the only way to do it. There may be other reasons. Passenger experience is quite a big one. The ability to segregate people, journey times. Unfortunately, at the moment, there's no PRT system demonstrating the full matrix benefits of the system. But these are coming. Sounds like there may be some interesting projects in the next few years which will be that next step on and show that you can achieve quite big journey time savings. There's a business case, so is it affordable? Who's going to pay for it? Do you need to repay the capital or not? That's a huge decision because that will affect your operating model, your franchise model, your overall payback periods. And finally, the planning model. Some of these systems, particularly in existing urban areas, are going to be difficult to implement. You will have objectives, environmental grounds, congestion grounds, well, maybe not congestion's a good one, but some of the other grounds you come up with. And also there's a sort of a national regulatory approvals regime to think about. Who's actually going to sign this off as safe? That affects some modes more than others. So ultimately, I think you should still use those three sort of headings. What's the need for this system, and and demonstrate the value of that system and why that system to whoever's funding it. So I'm going to just talk very quickly about these three headings. There's people in the room more qualified than me, particularly on the technical case, but essentially you can distill, why do you want an innovative mode? Is it deliverable, which you can do fairly quickly looking at, so if you're looking at an elevated PRT system, for example, there's radii constraints, there's gradient constraints. You may need to think about station spacing, etc. Does it run in the highway? In which case is there room? Does it run through public land? If you're looking at, say you wanted to buy a fleet of driverless vehicles, is that the right way? How are you going to legally deliver that? How do you operate it? And what are the risks in this? And one of the common things that comes back with innovative technologies, public bodies are risk averse. So, you need to factor that into your cost models. So, you need to come up with ridership. What's your system parameters? What's the physical characteristics? Is innovative the only way? Is it the best way? What is your case for that? And ultimately, you'll end up with probably something along the lines of an OD model, origin destination. Who's going from what station to what station, what location to what location? That'll help you with your vehicle numbers, your empty vehicle recycling, your fleet size, and can your concept alignment be delivered? So you need to check that first. What are the major constraints? Can you overcome them? You don't need to worry about every single bit of the track. You need to worry about the big ones. Then you move on to the business case. So there's sort of two things you can call a business case. In the UK, a business case is sort of an all-encompassing analysis of all the different bits, including all the sort of hard-to-cost benefits. There's also a raw financial case, which is how much am I getting in, how much have I got to put out in terms of operating, potentially covering the capital cost. Revenue's a big one. That's going to be covering a lot of your OPEX. So there's direct revenues from farebox. In-car advertising needs to be considered, particularly if you've got an exclusive group. So if you're ferrying executives backwards and forwards, that potential to advertise for those people, even for a few minutes, actually is quite valuable. System sponsorship has been used. The Emirates 360 cable car in London, that's got good sponsorship. At Heathrow, individual pods were sponsored. Some of the buses I saw at Rivium had some wraps on them. Then there's all the associated direct and indirect benefits which help with your bigger business case. You need to cost the system, which will be based on stations, fleet, track length. There's ways to do that, and we work with a lot of the manufacturers here to sort of do that. And finally, you need operational cost, which will be based on vehicle numbers, mileage, maintenance, refurbishment, and shockingly I missed staff numbers out on this, which is actually quite a big important one, as we heard from some of the people earlier. But on automated systems, you'd hope staff costs are a lot lower. And ultimately you put this into a model, and it will give you, when's your payback period, if there is a payback period, how much you need to invest, and then what is the appetite towards risk. And in doing this, you need to look at optimism bias, risk, inflation, depreciation of assets, scenario test all of this. And all of these things will depend on where you're operating, what country, what geography, what part of countries, who's your main client. The public sector generally is constrained in what they can assume for these things by, so in the UK, the Green Book, in the States, the state guidelines. Private sector developers, they're generally a lot more sort of risk happy. So they'll take a lower risk value and expect these things to come back. Just a quick on revenue, I talked about all the different options. These can be very important, and if you're a first adopter, and you're in the right location, this could be a strong revenue stream for you. This is one of my favourite sort of hard to cost benefits. So there's proven evidence out there that if you can link an area to heavy rail to public transport, but the land value goes up. Now, this is proven in the UK. This slide is from Ontario, Canada, I believe. There's other evidence from other countries. If you can capture that land value uplift, your overall business case is much better. You can also add in congestion benefits, because you're going to reduce congestion. You'll get an uplift potentially in other public transport modes. So if you connect to a railway, you'll have more railway passengers. You'll have air quality benefits, accident savings. These all build into your much bigger business case. But some of these can be very hard to capture in terms of your pounds and pence when you've got to pay back capital. So the planning case, how does it fit with local, state, national policy? Generally, these things are good. They fit well. They're perceived to be sustainable transport. They are at point of use. They can help with encouraging mobility, access to jobs. They tick a lot of boxes. You just need to think about what's the mechanism for delivery. If you're going to put a guideway, a track through an existing city, you're going to have a lot of objections. So what is the planning mechanism by which you deliver that? What are the objections? How do you overcome those? And then who's going to approve the system? And who's going to run the system? So you need to have some initial consideration for these things. So early on, you just need to identify them, quick bit of engagement with stakeholders, recognise there's a risk there or not, and proceed with your model. So this is some guidance from the UK. Initial appraisal, you concentrate mainly on the technical side, because if it doesn't work, there's no point doing it. But you'd also look at the business case, how you're going to fund it. The big one here is generally, does the capital need to be repaid or not? So if the public sector's investing, some UK governments want the capital repaid. That places a huge strain on your sort of long-term payback period. If it's just the operating mechanism, that can be done relatively quickly. You spend a bit less time on planning, but then as you build the case, and these things are cyclical, as technology evolves, as your project evolves, you need to repeat these things time and time again. Ultimately, you get to a point where you've got pretty much 100% of the work complete on each individual element. And that doesn't mean the project stops. You've done your concept development, you're into your planning and design, but you've still got procurement, mobilisation, etc. So it's all part of a much bigger stream. And over time, governments change, local authorities change, mayors change, so your politics can have a huge impact on this. All you need is a change of political party, suddenly their willingness to invest or to provide a subsidy changes, the whole project can be paused for years, jumped completely. So just a few projects I've worked on over the years. You're probably familiar with most of these. Heathrow, so this is the first project I ever worked on at Arup. I turned up on day one and was asked to look at jerk, which I had to look at what that was, but it's the rate of change of acceleration. And over time, I worked on station design, some radii. So why was this system put in at Heathrow? Which I understand came out at one of the Podcar City conferences, which is great. But ultimately, to overcome the constraints Heathrow had, which was connecting their business car park in the north to the terminal, it's very unlikely any other mode could have done it. The radii was tight. There was all sorts of vertical constraints to do with the radar, the aerodrome, as well as fitting in between existing infrastructure, such as the car park which was being built. Business case, well, they went from a very underutilised business asset to now one of the most popular car parks at Heathrow. In fact, they've now built a second car park, because I worked on that a few years ago. And the political will, it was there. Heathrow wanted their business class passengers to have something better. So it was driven through by key stakeholders. But airports are a good example of where these projects are politically easier to deliver. There's generally fewer stakeholders, and they can sort of do what they want to an extent. I put this one as quite close. This was in Gare du Nord in Brussels. It was a European project. We put a consortium together. So there was us, Ultra, Transport and Travel Research, who are a sort of policy evaluation company. And we put a funding bid in for a Ultra PRT system, which is connecting a business park down this area, across the river and into the station. This chopped quite a lot of journey time off the existing routes, which all have to go around on the bridges. Ultimately, though, political engagement wasn't there. Didn't get funding. The politicians wanted a driverless car on the road, not this. Couldn't get funding. The developer uplift, the financial case then collapsed because the capital wasn't going to be paid for by somebody else. This is my baby at the moment. This is a cable car in Bath in southwest England, which is a World Heritage City. Down the bottom here you've got a former Ministry of Defence base from the 1960s. It's been bought by housing company who are quite socially motivated. It's a very deprived area of Bath, which is one of the richest cities in the UK. What they want to do is connect their site, which is on the top of this hill, to the city centre. And the best way of doing that, after a process where we looked at PRT, bus rapid transit, toboggans, all sorts of craziness, eventually we came up with cable cars. And we've been progressing this with a number of cable car companies over the years. This, interestingly, has quite a good, wider technological case, the gradient, quite simply. Everything else has to go around these hills, and it takes a long time. It's very constrained by historic buildings. The financial case, Bath is a big tourist city. It's one of the most popular attractions in the UK. There's plans to get them on this cable car, which means your passenger numbers are pretty good. You can get quite a lot of people, and they'll pay a premium for it, which means you can discount for the socially deprived people at the top of the hill. The political case, we're still emerging on that one. There's some important people who live on these routes. One of the key issues we identified was oversale rights. So we've got some advice from lawyers on this. All built into our financial modelling is the cost of securing oversale rights, which is substantial, many millions of pounds. It's the San Jose Airport. So this was done a few years ago by Gary and a few others in our San Francisco office. Yep. Okay, cool, thanks. In short, the technical case was there. We've looked at alternatives which also have a good technical case. Now it's a matter of getting that political will and that funding and lining those up so this project can happen. This, I'll very quickly touch on, was a BRT project in Swansea. Many of these projects haven't happened in the UK. This one was driven through. The politicians really wanted it. It happened. And that's key, getting those stakeholders on board. Finally, this is an example from Bristol, my home city, where my office is. It was probably the only way, we think, to open up this area, which is the Enterprise Park in Bristol, which is trying to get 17,000 new jobs. Again, had a business case, could repay itself, can't secure the political support needed because they want us to repay the capital. That means the payback times are very, very long. No one's prepared to put in 20 years of investment when you're a politician. So, conclusions. Challenge for innovative transport. You need to make a winning cost versus value formula. You need to clearly have the benefits and the risks in there. People are risk averse, so if it's not clear, why would people invest? And you should take a phased approach through the technical, the business, and the political issues. There's too many of these projects which have a great technical case, they never happen for the other reasons. So finally, there's a little bit of publicity. There's now a book, if you're interested, at the registration on about business cases. And thank you. Any questions?